American workers paying into Social Security. All right, but that money coming into the trust is going right back out of the trust, and there'll be enough money to cover 77% of the benefits.
And that's kind of strange because with all the people that died early,
right,
who paid into it, where, you know, that doesn't make sense because there's a lot of people dying who never collect their Social Security.
Not as many though that are living longer. Okay, so there's more Americans living longer than dying early. All right.
Like as you know, as we talked, John asked earlier about the you know, people knowing people over 100, right? So you know what the fastest growing segment of the population is? Those people turning 100 or older.
Yeah.
Remember when Willard Scott used to put, like, you know, so and so sent me this letter and she's turning 100 today, and he would get like one a year.
Yeah, my
that's not happening obviously anymore, right? So because that population age is increasing, right, the question becomes how do you fund that? And one of the potential challenges becomes if they have cost of living increases, what does that do to the potential benefit being paid? It goes up, right? If it goes up, then what happens? Then you're having a compounding potential effect, and then you potentially have more being paid out, then obviously it's in the pie, right? So the, you know, by 2034, 2033, it's estimated roughly 75% reduction in there for it. So the question becomes this, right? A, do you think they're going to make any changes? My personal answer is yes. I think they're going to make changes to fix it in that part. B is, assume that they don't. Could you live on a 25% reduction? Right? I mean, if that's what the reduction is going to be, could you live on a 25% reduction? So if you're getting $30,000, right? You know, could you live on $22,500? The answer is yes. Then it's not a problem. The answer is no. Then the question becomes, how do we fill in to make up for that potential gap there, right? So John talked a little bit earlier about, you know, kind of IRAs, retirements, things that weren't available back earlier there for it. What really is an IRA account? What is a 401k account? What is a 403b account, other than a way to potentially save on taxes? What is that type of an account?
Income generation.
Income generation, exactly. It's a personal pension, right? You can take income out of it. You're not looking in there for those to be lump sum dollars that you're necessarily taking out. It's designed to be your own personal account, individual retirement account, IRA account, right? For you to be able to take money out of that account for your income, right? So I caution people to think of that as just lump sum dollars, and the question comes back to what's more important, the cash or the cash flow? Ida Mae Filler, had she have had the choice, may have gotten a $5,000 check, right? But she did. She started getting the cash flow, right? And over the 35 years that she was alive, ended up a very nice return on her investment, so to speak, right? So it's looking at what is that dollar amount, what is that amount going to print? What's my printing press going to provide me an income, right? Not necessarily that I have, pick a number, 5, 10, 15, 20, $100,000, whatever it is, because if you were to withdraw that money at a lump sum, let's say you had $100,000, you withdraw $100,000. What happens to that money?
Taxed.
Taxable. How much is taxed? You lose probably roughly about a third of it to taxes, right? And if you're under 59.5, there could be a 10% penalty in that port, right? So now your $100,000 now became, let's call it $70,000, right, on an after-tax basis. Well, what's going to generate you more income, $100,000 or $70,000? Right. So it's thinking in terms differently as far as what is that amount going to generate? What's the income that that cash can generate for, right? So it's starting to look at it. You know, one of the things that John talked about was, you know, what the interest rates are today. So in planning today, one of the considerations we're supposed to use is roughly between a 2.5% to 3% withdrawal rate. Meaning that if we use 2.5% to 3% on an average, your money should last through retirement. One of the biggest challenges is people taking more out, right? Because if I take too much out of the account, what happens to the account? The value could go down, right? And there's also a risk called a sequence of return risk, in that if I'm in the market and the market drops at the time I'm ready to start taking income for it, and I take income on a higher level, what's going to happen to that money? It's going to run out, right? People are more afraid of running out of money than they are of dying. One is a given. I don't know when it is, but one is a given. It's going to happen to all of us at some point in time, right? I don't know when, but it's going to, right? The other one is a probability for it, right? It could happen. Not saying that it's going to, but it could, right? But that's where you need to look at what the dollars are, how they're structured. Different dollars have different tax implications, right? So you need to understand how that all fits together, because as it does, that becomes part of the strategy to make sure that we've got the income coming in for it. All right? So, you know, John mentioned about, you know, the provisional offset. We've had a few people. My wife's a teacher, so she'll get dinged whenever we get to retirement out for it. Does anybody know what the rule was called before the, or what it's known in Chicago as? And who was chairman of the Ways and Means Committee back in 1984? Rostenkowski. It's the Rostenkowski rule. So Dan Rostenkowski, what did he get? He got a public pension, right? But he doesn't want you to collect all the money you put in. But he's dead now, so it doesn't matter, I guess. But that was basically what the rule was, right? Is that the whole idea on it. Typically, if you are receiving those pensions, on average, it's about 40% that you will receive of the Social Security. On average. Could be a little more, could be a little less, but on average, it's about 40%, right? So if you're planning, when you get your Social Security statement, it says, hey, I'm going to get $1,200 or $1,000 of that for it, and you know that you're receiving a public pension of that for it, well, you're not going to get that $1,200, right? You're only going to get maybe $800, right? So you have to look at it to understand and not over-project what your income is going to be for it, because if you don't, then you're going to be in an upside-down position for it, right? So, and with interest rates, 10-year Treasury is right now under 1.5%, right? Does anybody think interest rates are going to go up fast anytime soon, right? So if interest rates don't go up anytime soon, you know, John had talked about what you need at 1.5% to generate the same amount of money, let's say at 5% for it, it's a significantly larger number, right? So that's why it's important to start looking at what income is, right, and where income, not all income is the same, right? Income in Illinois in pensions is different than income in Indiana in pensions, right? Anybody know why? Indiana taxes pensions. Illinois does not at this point in time. Always put that caveat in there because they could change the law at any time, right? But they don't tax pension income. They don't tax Social Security income. Illinois does not tax annuity income, right? So those are considered pensions, right? So as such, being an Illinois resident in retirement could be an advantage. There are, of the 50 states, there are 9 states that have no personal income taxes. There are 3 states that do not tax pensions and retirement income. One of them is Illinois, one is Mississippi, and one is in the Northeast. I can never remember it. So there's 3 states. So if you think of it, you want to look at tax-friendly states potentially when you are looking at retirement, because it's not what you make, it's what you keep, right? And if you have to pay too much in taxes, then you're not keeping it, right? In addition to that, there's always been some talk about, well, you know, higher income earners should get less Social Security because they make too much now for it. The reality is they get less as a proportion of their total income in retirement from Social Security. So, for example, let's say somebody makes $60,000, right? And in retirement, they're going to get roughly $25,000 of Social Security benefit. Let's say somebody makes $100,000, and they get the same $25,000. As a percentage of the income they made, who gets more? The person that made 60, right? That's roughly 40% of their income. For the person that made $100,000, it's only 25% of their income. So Social Security is already being addressed that way with regard to means testing, with regard to higher income earners, right? So when the politicians try and tell you, it already is. It's just a matter of they're not smart enough to tell you. Yes?
What was the third? You said Illinois, Mississippi. What was the third state?
It's in the Northeast. I can't remember what. I have it written down somewhere, but I don't. It's like Connecticut. It's not Connecticut. It's like New Hampshire or Vermont or something like that.
New Hampshire, Nevada, Florida.
Well, those are states that have no personal income taxes. There are 3 states that don't tax retirement income for it. So if you think of it in retirement, there's a total of 12 states that do not tax income in retirement for it. Okay. So it's a matter of starting to look at where those are at for it. The other part, if you are thinking in terms of Social Security, one thing also to consider for your children is having a long-term care plan. The reason for that is, statistically, it is the oldest female in the family that takes care of mom and dad. Okay. If the oldest female is taking care of mom and dad, what does that potentially do to her ability to earn?
Less.
Makes it less. If she can't earn, what potentially happens to her Social Security? It's reduced, right? So if you have a situation where someone is doing that, right, then what happens? Now you've got a situation where in their retirement years, they could potentially have less income in that for it because they've taken time out of the workforce to help mom and dad out, or aunt and uncle, or whoever it might be in that for, right? So it's a matter of just looking at what the numbers and understanding as part of your strategy. How does it all fit together, right? It's not one number, it's the whole plan that makes sense for it, right? So if you don't pay into Social Security, or know somebody that doesn't pay into Social Security, right now if they pay into TRS or SERS or that for it, and they are planning on retiring before 2024, the state of Illinois is offering a potential buyout option with regard to your 3% compounded increase in that for it, right? So there's actually, you can go to the website and actually pull out a projection for it and run the numbers to see what that number would be if you were to retire at a certain age. What that, it's a 10-year, basically you don't get the bonus, you don't get the 3% compound in that for it. They give you a lump sum of those dollars for it. To understand if that would make sense, or taking the 3% compound makes sense, is something to potentially evaluate. The only thing I will say with it is that if you look at state of Illinois pensions and where they're funded at, I don't know if the funding levels right now, TRS I think is out of money around 2029, 2030, right? So when they run out of money, again, public pensions are considered benefits. They are not considered requirements, and as such can be changed, altered, or eliminated at any point in time. Not saying they will, but they could. Social Security is a public benefit. They could eliminate Social Security tomorrow. I'm not saying they are. Don't call and say I'm saying they're social. Okay, it's not what I'm saying. But they can, by virtue of, we know in 2034, 2033, if they don't make any changes, what's going to happen to Social Security? It's going to get cut by roughly 25%, right? Is that a change to Social Security?
Yeah.
I would say so, assuming that it gets that far forward, right? I'm not saying it's going to. I think they will make changes before then, but those are areas, right? So those are the things that need to be looked at when you start to take a look at Social Security and retirement income planning. It's not necessarily cash again. I'm not saying that cash can't be positive. It's what that cash produces that is the key, right? A company doesn't produce a good just to have the good sit on their shelf, right? They produce a pen or a paper or a camera or whatever to do what? To be sold, right? Because when it's sold, that's when they actually make the money on the product, right? So it's how much product or how much income, how much cash can you generate to be able to meet the income needs that you're going to have in retirement when you retire, right? And there's lots of different strategies for it. Yes?
Yes, but they recently passed a bill last year. If you worked in another system and didn't pay into TRS, like Chicago Public Schools doesn't pay into TRS. They have reciprocity. There's reciprocity, and so if you paid into IMRF, you get reciprocity for TRS. I believe IMRF right now is the only state program where you not only pay into IMRF, but you also pay into Social Security. So if you're an IMRF employee, you have the option for, you have the potential for both. If you work like in the suburbs, like or something like that, or CPS employee, they would take at least 40% of your paycheck to go into TRS if you didn't sign up for some kind of thing. Yeah, I don't know that program for it. That was just last year that they started that. Maybe that's probably because it's a CPS program, not a state program. It's TRS. Understand, but CPS is a separate entity. It's not handled by the state; it's handled by the city, right? So since CPS is handled by the city, it does not necessarily fall under state rules as something, right? So it's a whole separate. So it's not part of the state system in that for it. That's why they would potentially have the charges in that for it, right? So when you start to look at what your whole income area and the assets are, it's a matter of starting to align the assets to do what we want to do. I mean, many of you and I have talked, and it's like, well, my first question is always, when do you need this money? What's the money for? What's the purpose behind it? Because once we go through those questions, then we can align the investment structure to meet whatever it is that your goals are for those particular proceeds.
right? It's not the other way around. We've got this great option that potentially can produce this. Well, yeah, but I need the money tomorrow. Well, then that doesn't make any sense then, maybe, right? So the idea is starting to look at what we have, positioning the assets appropriately to meet the long-term or short-term goals that we have for it. So, any questions?
Yeah.
Yes?
Have you heard about this new tax that Illinois have coming out about cars? Like a used car, if you trade a car in.
Yeah, that went effective January 1st. So the question was, Illinois instituted a new tax effective January 1st if you, on the trade-in of vehicles, and therefore there has been a significant pushback by the Auto Dealers Association in Illinois because they are losing states. They're losing business to out of state and other places for it. The last I heard on it was they were looking to potentially reduce the tax, but essentially come January 1st of this year, basically, I think it was triple the tax that you were paying on a trade-in or that for it. I think it went to like 6% of whatever your trade-in above a $10,000 amount was for it, right? So there's been a lot of pushback on it because dealers in the state, you can go over to Indiana and buy your car, and you still do have to pay the tax though, but then they're not. They may have some other incentives over there for it. But so dealers in the state, I know there's a big pushback, and car sales have been challenged because of it. A lot of people are holding on to their vehicles and that for it. So it does make sense to potentially look at it, but that's something that the state decided they wanted to try and steal more of your money from. So which they're doing a good job of it. They just write laws and take that money away, right? Yes.
I have a question because they keep talking about the virus and that the Dow Jones is going down. If you have money invested, should you be concerned?
So the question was, if you have money invested, you should be concerned. Depends on what the money is for. If it's longer term money and that for it, depending on the situation, could be a perfect time to invest. Right? Somebody asked me the other day, what would I buy if I could buy something, and I said anything. At that point in time, it had dropped. It was down about 8% at that point. I was like, whatever I put my money into, at some point in time, it's going to bounce back up for it. And as long as I don't need the money tomorrow or the next day or that for it, most likely it's going to come back up for it. And we've seen over the last, we've seen for this last week or last 3 days, I didn't see today what happened, but at least last 3 days, on a net basis for the week, we're up about, I think about 1,500 points for it, right? So it was up 12, it was up 13. Yesterday was, I think, about 1,000. The day before we were down 8, so we're down roughly 1,200 points for the week. So I don't know, again, I don't know what today is in that for it. But I mean, so the question is, it's like any type of an investment area for it, as long as it's set up for the right purpose, and depending on, there are certain products you can have which can help protect income and help protect principal and that for it, so that you don't have to worry about those things. All right? And that's all part of your strategy to make sure that the assets are in the right place to do what it is that you need to have done. Not all income is the same, not all assets are the same. Right? It all depends about the strategy that goes along with what those assets are supposed to do. Any other questions? Okay. Well, thank you very much. We'll look forward to seeing you next month.